Good evening. Welcome and thank you for joining us on the first episode of Beyond Borders, the U.S. elections right here from Kuwait, as we cover events in the ongoing U.S. presidential elections that will take place in few days. More after the break. Our guest is a professor at the American University of Kuwait, the Department Chair of International Relations, Mr. Dr. Roman Kulchitsky. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Roman.
Thank you, Ms. Farrah. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Today we will be discussing the American election that will be taking place on November 8th, which is in a few days. It's interesting and exciting, right? Time for the U.S. and for the rest of the world.
It's very interesting. It's been once in a lifetime, I think, opportunity for many of us to be watching this election, yes.
Every U.S. presidential election is unpredictable. Almost all of them are competitive to some extent. They typically offer candidates who come from a similar set of backgrounds, a vice president, senator, or a governor. In fact, the last time the United States elected a president without one or more of those titles were Dwight Eisenhower in 52 and 56. Since 1788, every major party nominee has been a male nominee. This is going to be different this time. There's a woman nominee, Hillary Clinton.
First time.
So I would like to know more about your opinion. Do you think this will affect the future of the United States if a woman is elected?
Well, I think it's the first time. It's a special moment because you have a candidate which is a woman. So this is the first for the United States. The question is that will that really matter when the people go to the polls? I mean, are people going to vote because Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is a woman, or are they going to vote for her because of their view or belief or in support of her issues?
That's interesting. Well, each nominee this year for the U.S. elections impact the Middle East if they win or if they lose. Like, for example, do you think winning the elections, Trump winning the elections or Hillary winning the elections, is going to affect the Middle East, especially the Gulf, in a bad way or a good way? How do you see that happening?
Well, I think there's a lot more to speculate with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, because she has been Secretary of State, she has been a senator, and so she has been involved in the formulation and implementation of U.S. policy around the world, including the Middle East, including the Gulf. A lot of people believe that her approach to foreign policy would be pretty much similar to former President Nixon's policies, President Bush Sr.'s policies, her husband's policies, and of course Barack Obama. And so many people believe that her approach would be more of a continuation of a Barack Obama administration. Although some have speculated she may be a little more aggressive, a little more, I would say, stronger with her diplomatic decisions, her use of the military. So she'd be a little more aggressive, kind of a harder version of President Obama.
Do you think, what about Trump?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. People really don't know. He has made comments about foreign policy, but in terms of formulating some sort of coherent approach to dealing with other nation states, that's the question. There's a big question mark. The fact that he does not have a background in foreign policy perhaps makes some people like him a little more, because I think right now there's this kind of reactionary mood in the United States where he's an outsider and they want an outsider to come in. But as it relates to foreign policy, I think that's the real big question. I think that with respect to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, you're not going to see neoconservatives coming back. When I say neoconservatives, these are the experts who were involved in George Bush, the younger version, and so they were involved in formulating the policies in terms of the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq. They're not going to come back. On the other hand, I think with Hillary Clinton, you'll probably see her continue Barack Obama's approach, to, let's say, to fighting strategic issues like fighting terrorism, trying to control or to control or limit the proliferation of nuclear weapons in this region, protecting Israel, and of course supporting allies. The thing which has been interesting about foreign policy, I think, has been the Russian card. Clearly, Hillary Clinton has taken a much more aggressive approach.
Before I'm sorry to interrupt you, but because there's something really important I would like to discuss with you before rushing to Russia.
Sure.
I think we have come into a world that is isolating itself after, I mean, the world have become a melting pot after globalization. So what happened with the UK, for example, agreeing to have a Brexit happening and trying to release itself outside the European Union, the right-wing party trying to take over in France with Marine Le Pen and trying to isolate itself from the European Union. Do you think the US is going on that way, to isolate itself from the world?
Well, I think it's, to me, the way I see it, I see it more of a symptom. If you're looking at Brexit and you're looking at how the votes broke down, or the demographics of who voted, what age groups voted, the predominant people who voted to leave the European Union were older people. Yeah. You had people in the rural areas. The majority of the younger people voted overwhelmingly to stay in the European Union. Many within the cities voted to stay. And then, of course, you have not, the UK consists of really three nations. And so Scotland, for example, there are people who aspire independence in Scotland, but they are a nation that's part of, UK is a multiple nation state. They voted, the majority, to stay in the European Union. And the thing which I found interesting was kind of why people voted the way they did. And it appeared that people were kind of longing this to kind of go back to the way it was. And I think, and that's why, and I'm saying that because of this whole issue of globalization. The world is changing very quickly.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are prepared. A lot of people, I think, are scared. I think older people are scared because they may not really understand what's happening. They're retired, they kind of worked hard, they saved their money, and now suddenly they're seeing things change, and they're not sure. They kind of long to where it was a period where they were more comfortable. And so you had a lot of people that kind of were hoping for this kind of post-World War II Britain, which is no longer the case. Now, getting back to the United States, I think in the case of the United States, you do have a reactionary movement taking place. And actually what you have is you have this kind of merger of different interest groups, so to speak. But let's say in terms of the reactionaries, a lot of people who appear to be supporters of Donald Trump are people that have lost a lot of their money in 2008. These are people who are seeing jobs leave the United States. And they're not exactly sure whether they can compete, or they're not sure, what kind of future they're going to have in this kind of world. And so really the world is moving so quickly, and yet people are not preparing themselves for that move, and they're very upset, they're very scared.
That's why, do you think, like maybe probably the political statements or the logo campaigns of both nominees are really extreme, or what do you think on that?
Well, I think that if we're sticking on Brexit, I think what has happened is people have jumped there are a lot of opportunists, of course, in politics. And in many cases, your success in politics is based on seizing the opportunity. So if you take a look at if you're taking a look at the people that were promoting Brexit in England or in the UK, they would have pictures of these pro-Brexit people behind massive amounts of people migrating or immigrating into England, for example, or at least as if all these people are going to be going into England. And so what you had was, and what's happened, at least with the refugee crisis, is it's no longer a refugee crisis, it's become a security crisis.
Exactly.
And so they're playing on people's fears.
Yeah.
The idea that you're playing on the fact that this Polish man who's working hard, putting food on the table for his family, he's taking your job away.
Exactly. That's what everyone is worried about, the US and Europe as well.
And I think that, to me, I think what's happening is that people are so upset, people are so angry, they need to kind of, they're not sure, this is a symptom. And people are playing on it. And so
Trump is playing on that nerve, right?
I think, people have, he's a marketeer. I mean, he's a businessman. He's into branding. He's branded the Trump name, so he knows how to sell. And if an image works, you sell the image.
Exactly.
And I think what he's seen, most likely, he has seen this as an opportunity, has seized with it. Because the big question about, and going back to foreign policy, is does Donald Trump really believe what he says? And that we don't know.
Sorry, we'll answer this question right after the break. We will take a break and we'll be right back. Okay, so thank you for your valuable information, and I
My
know
pleasure.
this subject is really intense and condensed with information because each country's political, economical effects spill over the other countries, especially in the UK and in Europe and in the United States. However, we will be right back with this discussion after to check out a report about Clinton. Hillary Clinton continues to slam Trump on his treatment of women. We'll check that report right now.
Hillary Clinton continues to attack her Republican challenger, Donald Trump, and his treatment of women while campaigning in the battleground state of Florida. Alicia Machado, the Venezuelan-born former Miss Universe, introduced Clinton in that city, Florida, saying,
It's clear, it's really clear that he does not respect women. He just judges us on our looks. He thinks he can do whatever he wants and get away with it.
Clinton echoed Machado's sentiments on Trump.
You know, it's not okay to insult people. It's not okay. And look at what he does. He calls women ugly, disgusting, nasty all the time. He calls women pigs, rates bodies on a scale from 1 to 10.
Clinton urged Florida voters to spend the days up to the election to reflect on the issues.
1 week from today, we will be choosing our next president and commander-in-chief of the United States. I don't think the choice could be any clearer.
Hillary Clinton, hoping to be the first woman elected to the White House, strengthened her lead over Trump in polls after the release last month of a 2005 video in which the Republican bragged in vulgar terms about groping women.
So we've seen the report.
Yes.
Okay, we know, I mean, it's not a surprise that there have been a lot of clashes on Twitter between the nominees, reactions, people filing for certain cases against Trump that is for assaulting women overall. Maybe because he's a TV personality and he's not usually political. His personal life has been under the spotlight lately. I mean, in your opinion, as a scholar, as someone who is academic, who teaches young students about how to be diplomatic, how to enter the world of politics, how to study in that department, have you seen something like this before as a debate? I mean, how Hillary and Trump have been debating lately?
I think, especially with respect to the video clip, I think what has surprised a lot of people is here you have a candidate who's maybe saying things that other people think, but have been taught from, let's say, from family environment to even into the into schools or in organizations, that you don't really say these kind of things even if you think those things. I think that we have developed an expectation on how a president ought to behave. And I think that with the candidacy of Donald Trump, that in a way has kind of shattered that, because here you have someone who appears to just say what he thinks. And with that, what has happened is people are beginning to think that it's okay, even if it maybe is insulting or hurts someone else's feelings or makes someone else uncomfortable. The question then becomes, is how is that going to play, not so much with his base, because I think we've seen, both on the Democrat side and on the Republican side, you have a base that pretty much you can count on their support, whether Democrat or Republican. The question now becomes, and this is really where a presidential candidate wins, is how you are able to sell your message to the people in the middle, people that are kind of, let's say, independent leaning Democrat, independent leaning Republican. And then, of course, you have those that are women, and how are women going to deal with that? I mean, here you have someone who says things that, that your mother obviously would have slapped you in your face if you said that in front of her.
Yeah.
Or you could probably get in trouble if you say something like that in the workplace and be accused of sexual harassment.
There's so many movements happening right now by celebrities from Hollywood, people, and even in media and social media platforms are actually promoting they're actually using that against Trump and promote for Hillary. Do you think that's her as a female is the only idea or theme that it's going to make her win the elections because she's a woman?
I think we have to be careful who the messengers are, okay? Because there's a lot of people taking advantage of that. For example, you have directors. Directors have always known to use, to say, the casting couch, where they essentially intimidate women in order for them to get their acting parts. You have corporate executives who have engaged in behavior, which they're now accusing Donald Trump of doing. So, or the most recent one I found most fascinating was you have you had a supporter of Trump who was actually making a case and criticizing the press for spending too much time on the Trump situation with women, Congressman Gingrich. And here you have Congressman Gingrich, who, when he was taking the lead on the impeachment of Bill Clinton, was having an extramarital affair with one of his secretaries or someone in his office. And they were accusing Bill Clinton of a marital infidelity. Now, my point is this, and this was raised, people raised it, you're sending the wrong messenger if you're making a case that this is really important. My point is there's a tremendous amount of hypocrisy. Then you have the issue doesn't really matter whether the person's private behavior really will affect.
Why is the media taking a side, do you think, in that election?
Because it's newsworthy. I think the media has
Why Hillary? Why not Trump?
When you say why Hillary?
The media is like a lot of newspapers, like the New York Times, the Washington Post,
supporting her.
They're endorsing her already, and they actually did polls that she won the debates. I mean, why is this happening?
I think perhaps more because Hillary Clinton probably is behaving. Now, again, this would be my personal opinion.
Okay.
She's behaving within the realms of expectations on how a candidate ought to behave. She's focusing on the issues. She's focusing on her domestic policy. She's focusing on her foreign policies. Then you have another candidate, Donald Trump, who everyone is still kind of in shock that he won the primary. And he's out there saying these things that really are, don't seem to be very polite, and some very vulgar. And they're going with it. Now, whether or not there's some sort of premeditated act on the part of the media to be biased towards Hillary Clinton and against Trump, I think the only way you can suggest it is you take you look at the history of the news channel. The news channel tends to be critical of a candidate, and, like, for example, if you're criticizing Barack Obama for his foreign policy, and then let's say someone on the Republican side is making a similar case, and you don't criticize him, then there's that kind of hypocrisy where there's a double standard. But I wanted to point that there is a double standard with regards to a lot of the people that are attacking Donald Trump. I am not defending Donald Trump. I think For me, I'm uncomfortable with the way the things he said.
Okay.
And it's not, and, you know, maybe it was a 17, 18-year-old kid who, I'm not saying it's right, but he's kind of talking, this is kind of like I'm expecting to lecture my son on how not to talk about women when he says something like that. Not someone who's 59, 69 years old and behaving that way. It's like the idea of, and having someone with daughters to talk like that. That could be someone talking about your own daughter and so forth. But what I'm saying is many of the people that are throwing stones themselves probably may have been guilty. I mean, how many times have we seen when there's a live mic, someone saying something to another person,
yes.
which kind of...
But the media is taking a huge position in shifting the perception of audience to a certain candidate.
No, they're making it an issue. I think it's an important issue that if someone is out there and is open to telling people how he thinks about women or how he views women, I think that's fair game.
Well,
Okay.
hold this thought because
Sure.
it's really important. We will check another report. It's about the impact of the U.S. presidential elections on Wall Street.
U.S. stocks opened low, with the S&P 500 falling for the 7th straight day, as a tightening race for the White House prompted investors to seek safe haven assets such as gold. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 51.81 points to 17,985.29 points. The S&P 500 lost 5.01 points to reach 2,106.71 points, and the Nasdaq Composite dropped 9.34 points to reach 5,144.24 points. The U.S. Federal Reserve is expected to keep interest rates unchanged, but set the stage for a hike in December amid signs the economy is picking up steam. The central bank has grown increasingly confident about raising rates, and Chair Janet Yellen said in September that a move before the end of the year was likely should employment and inflation continue to strengthen.
We've seen the report. We've seen usually how politics affect the economy and how economy affect the politics. It's a win-win situation and everything affects the other. My question is, do you think a recession will take place or something going to affect the Wall Street stock market and the companies, and people are going to be afraid to invest anything in the U.S. after Trump wins, for example?
Well, I think that if we take a look at what happened in England after the Brexit,
Yeah.
A lot of money left England.
Yeah.
And that's because markets don't like uncertainty. Not to mention there were a lot of investments in England to use England as a beachhead to enter into the European Union. So you had companies that are beginning to relocate or are thinking about relocating, because remember, Brexit hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
Now the
It'll take
Supreme,
another
and it's-
year or
well,
something.
their court just ruled that Parliament has to vote on it. So anything can happen, of course, right? But so what you would, so when you had that story that broke with the FBI, the markets went down, right? And then that's because markets don't like uncertainty. So probably if someone like Trump, who people have been told was not going to win and suddenly wins, okay, that's uncertainty. So you're going to see a lot of people kind of becoming concerned, and you'll see shifts in the flows of money. But then a lot of it's going to depend on what the policies are going to be. You know, once whoever becomes president, and let's say if Donald Trump becomes president.
He's a businessman. Do you think that will make it better?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you know, a businessman is not a politician is not a businessman. So you can't run government the way you run your corporation.
Exactly.
And if you think you can, I was actually talking with a colleague of mine today at AUK about this concept, and he's a psychologist, and there's this kind of effect that they talk about called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where the less you know about something, the smarter you think you're about, the more you think you know. Let me restate that. The less you know about something, the more informed you think you're about it.
Yeah.
And I think that the problem is that it's going to be a tremendous learning curve for Donald Trump in knowing how to deal with Congress, knowing how to deal with not just the House of Representatives, but also the Senate, and also the fourth branch of government, the shadow branch of government, which is the bureaucracy. So there's going to be a serious learning curve, and therefore, at that point, people are not going to be sure whether he's going to do a good job or not. And I would think during that period, people are going to be, the markets are going to respond in a negative way. But depends how he responds. The markets may go back up.
Yeah, but the thing is, when it comes to economy, let's say, if there's something that is uncertain. For example, I recall when the Brexit decision happened and the referendum took place, the mayor of London decided that he wants to write a petition calling to separate London from the UK because they don't consider London as a multicultural cosmopolitan city to isolate itself because all the banks are there, all the investments are there, they take advantage of having people from all over the world working in London. Do you think that if the economy got affected, it will also automatically affect how the country deals with its migrants, how they deal with accepting people coming from outside? You have the Trump having very extreme opinions about migrants coming to the country, and then you have Hillary with her own policy.
I think that...
what happens to migrants?
Well, I think that the United States, just like the United Kingdom, is a country of laws. They have rules. And I think that perhaps there may be some people, as in the case of the UK, and most likely in the case of the United States, that if someone like Donald Trump gets elected, they may think that they've been empowered to maybe do things to migrants or to immigrants because it's okay. But I think, and I have faith in the American system, and that once these people begin breaking laws, I was just reading in the newspaper today where some Trump, or at least I guess we assumed they were Trump supporters because it had voted Trump on this church, an African American church. That it's you have people that are doing that, and I think that's one of the dangers that has occurred, is that because of the way the campaign has gone, it's kind of become okay to say to behave in a racist way.
Right, yeah.
It's okay to insult women. No, it's not okay. All right.
Yeah, of course.
And here you have someone who's a president who's behaving that way. And again, but the point is, does he really believe in what he says? We don't know, and we'll know after he becomes if he becomes president, right?
True.
And it's just the same thing with Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton has been pretty much very aggressive towards Russia. The question is, does she believe in what she says, right? And I think that, but based on her past knowledge of Hillary Clinton, she probably would be a tougher opponent for whoever runs Russia, because she has been in the past. And in the best predictor of the future is past behavior, right?
Exactly.
So she has sent those signals, and the fact that maybe Russia, because I think another thing that I wanted to throw out there, it's been very interesting, and this is, I think, the reality of globalization, is that we no longer can exclude other countries from affecting the flow of information to our people,
Of course.
whatever country,
Yes.
and in an effort to kind of give them information that may affect how they vote, right? And so Russia would argue they are engaged in their own public diplomacy, perhaps, and then kind of providing people information. And at least the way the narrative has gone is that some people have argued that they prefer Trump, right?
Some people are endorsing Hillary as we speak, and to focus on that idea, Obama, a few days ago, officially endorsed her. Why do you think, I mean, we're going to check a report, but my question is, why now? Why did he endorse her, wait for like a couple of days to endorse her? Why didn't he announce it in the beginning or when the election started? Do you think that the time matters, or it just happens?
Well, timing is everything. Timing is everything, especially in politics. So clearly the strategic decision was made on when would be the most opportunistic time to endorse the candidate. So I clearly it was in there. Probably it was agreed that it was in the advantage of the Hillary campaign to have President Obama endorse her when he did.
So let's check what President Obama did in this report.
Sure.
U.S. President Barack Obama urged voters to lend their support for Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton. The president, at a campaign rally in Columbus, Ohio, admitted his former Secretary of State had made mistakes during her time in public service, but said that she was a fundamentally good and decent person who would make an outstanding president.
These are not equal candidates. There's only one who's actually worthy of your vote, who is smart, who is steady, who is tested, whose heart is in the right place, who is probably the most qualified person ever to run for this office, and that is Hillary Clinton.
Obama's speech comes as the Clinton campaign deals with the fallout from the FBI investigation into new emails that may be connected to Clinton. Opinion polls show Clinton's lead has narrowed slightly since early last week, but it is still too early to say whether the email controversy was hurting her.
Thank you, guys. People talking about President Obama recently, as we checked in the report. I want you to tell me more exactly about, do you think the critics of Obama and his presidency and how he dealt with things internally and in terms of foreign policy are going to attack Clinton or criticize her the same way if she wins?
Well, no, because you have different people, you have different groups, and they have different criticisms that they've levied. So you don't have one voice, you have multiple voices out there in terms of criticizing the administration of President Barack Obama. With respect to, let's say, his approach, his style, you know, he is very diplomatic, for example. He's more an ideas man. He has an argument, he makes it he puts it out logically, and he tries to convince you. Problem is, you can't convince people. You have to have a stick. You know, Lyndon B. Johnson would get things done because he would basically, if you don't get things done, these are the consequences. And people knew that he wasn't bluffing. So you have a situation where people may have been very critical of Barack Obama because he wasn't tough enough, he wasn't rough enough. And I think that probably some people may argue, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, is that she probably will be a tougher version of Obama.
What's going to happen to Obamacare when he leaves?
That's a big question. You're hearing information that somewhere out there it's starting to have problems. I think clearly if the Republicans have control of the levers, they would be probably inclined to try to neuter it. And in terms of what Hillary Clinton would do, again, you know, the question is I think she may most likely continue. Because keep in mind that part of the deal with the Bernie Sanders people was that they were given a voice on the platform, and in their support for her candidacy, they were given some assurances that certain issues were going to be supported by Hillary Clinton.
The Foreign Policy has published an article, a long one actually, a couple of months ago, about the U.S.-Saudi Arabian relations, and that it's a little bit critical and uncertain. Do you think these kind of relations, whether they might be good or bad, are going to affect the U.S. and Kuwait?
Well, I think that
because Kuwait and Saudi Arabia are allies.
Correct. I think from a U.S. point of view, you know, as I tell my students, you know, countries don't like each other, they don't dislike each other. They have self-interest. People like and dislike each other.
What is U.S. interest in Kuwait and vice versa?
And I think that in terms of the United States will do what it thinks is in its self-interest. For example, when Iraq invaded Kuwait, the United States came in and led the way to help to liberate Kuwait. And that was partly because of Kuwait's strategic importance, not just because of Kuwait and its being an ally of the United States, but also Kuwait and Saudi Arabia are next to each other. And the idea that Saddam Hussein would be next door to Saudi Arabia made a lot of people uncomfortable. And the decision was made in the 1970s that the United States made a decision in the 1970s, we have to protect Saudi Arabia. So the question then becomes, if there would be a shift, and again, you really don't know, because you don't really know what people are saying behind closed doors. But if you're going to speculate, you would speculate on whether or not it's, is it in the United States' strategic advantage not to be as big a supporter of Saudi Arabia today? And I think I don't really see that. Some people have speculated that there has been a pivot, so to speak. But again, in the end of the day, it's going to be what is in the interest of Saudi Arabia, what is in the interest of Kuwait, and what is in the interest of the United States. And of course, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait are part of the GCC. So there's a regional kind of collective interest, that a meeting of the minds of
even if the U.S., for example, find a way to have a kind of a settlement with Iran, do you think that will affect the Gulf? I mean, how can the U.S. manage to deal with the Gulf and the Iran at the same time and make them both happy?
I think, and this again is my personal opinion, that the decision to deal with Iran and Iran's desire to acquire nuclear energy, okay, you can't, and of course that's a necessary condition for nuclear weapons, but they're nowhere near that. Was more of a kind of a realpolitik decision, that the argument is they're probably going to get the capability, so if they're going to get the capability, let's manage it. So if they're going to get it, let's stop wasting time in trying to prevent them from getting what they're going to get down the road, and let's start sowing the seeds for some sort of management. And that's why I meant about maintaining President Barack Obama's attempt to control nuclear proliferation. And that is if one accepts that they're going to get it, and that if they are going to get it, what can we do to kind of control or monitor or protect ourselves from its abuse, so to speak?
Basically, when usually Trump talks about having a logo calls "Make America Great Again," what does he mean by that?
Well, what he probably means is tapping into his base of people who feel that America has lost its way.
What happened to the American dream?
Well, the problem with the American dream is right now a lot of people are facing very high prices. You're taught if you work hard, you play by the rules, you do what's right, you'll have a secure life. Okay, and what's happening is people are working hard, both mother and father working hard, and they're just they're just making ends meet. The cost of sending your kids to school is going up. The cost of buying milk is skyrocketing. And
also young people graduating, paying debts for years.
Well, that's a big deal. I was, again, a professor just was telling me he had to finally paid off his school loans.
Oh, wow.
And actually, if you recall, the senator from Florida made a big case that he just paid off his loans during one of the debates.
That's interesting.
So yeah, you have these massive loans, and people are making money off these loans. These are not, someone is getting a profit.
But why the Clinton and Trump, they did not discuss these kind of subjects in their 3 debates?
Well, I think a lot of it, first of all, you respond to what the questions to the moderators.
Okay.
They guide the discussion.
They did not include.
Number one, it wasn't
the protests that are happening right now in North Dakota. They did not care.
Well, because it didn't come up, and no one made it an issue. And so
okay.
typically what happens is if someone makes it an issue, unless you really feel it's in your advantage to making it an issue. I mean, sometimes during a debate, even though someone asks you a question, you don't answer it, but you talk about something else because you want to pivot the discussion to what you want to talk about. And that's what a lot of politicians do, right, during their debates. Because really it's not so much a debate as it is about making a case on an issue and then people responding to what the other person has said.
Yeah.
So really there's a spontaneity that occurs during these debates.
More of them trying to lash at each other?
I wouldn't say lash. I think that with response to Hillary Clinton, she was pouncing on the things that Donald Trump has said. And in many ways, Donald Trump is getting attacked for things that he has said.
Let's talk about Trump right now in a special report just for him, saying that winning the presidency would be Brexit 10 times.
Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump took his campaign to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where he commented on a letter sent by the Federal Bureau of Investigation Director James Comey to Republican lawmakers. In the letter, Comey said that an investigation into his rival Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton's emails was not yet complete.
Now the FBI has found, you're not going to believe this one, this just happened, another 650,000 emails. How do you get to 650? I think that's called the mother lode. I think they found them all. So the 33,000 that she deleted and bleached, I think is going to be in the 650. But how do you have that many emails? What do you do? Sit down all day and just keep typing? Hey, no wonder nothing gets done in our country. This is the single biggest scandal since Watergate.
Sources close to the investigation said the latest emails were discovered as part of a separate probe into Anthony Weiner, the estranged husband of Clinton's aide, Huma Abedin. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump pounded away at the new FBI development, devoting a large part of the campaign speech in Albuquerque to attacking Clinton and arguing that she is not to be trusted with the presidency. He also said his nomination and support is almost like a revelation, that if he is elected, would be bigger than Brexit.
It's almost a miracle that's taking place. We're leading in the polls. We're leading in the states. This is special. You have to get out every last vote because you know the odds are stacked against us. You do know that. Get out and vote. We're going to win it so big. This will be Brexit times 10.
Clinton had opened up a significant lead over Trump in public opinion polls before the letter surfaced. The most recent polls had showed that the lead had narrowed slightly.
Okay, so we heard Trump that winning in the presidency would be like 10 times Brexit. What do you think of that?
Well, again, the question becomes, does he really believe in what he says? Or he's just saying it because it's something that kind of may resonate in people's minds.
You told me something off air. You told me he's targeting old people. Do you think that is important?
I think the clip on the emails. I mean, think about this. Senior citizens don't really use email. They still write the old-fashioned way. Now, some do, but by and large, the idea that you can have 600,000 emails is unintelligible for most senior citizens, okay? It's a different story for younger people. Now, let's take a look who votes. Votes are senior citizens. They never miss an election. Yeah. Younger people are less likely to vote than a senior citizen. Politicking 101, you learn that you always go and knock on a senior citizen's door because they are going to vote. And the young people may say they're going to vote, but something comes up and they don't vote. So, and keep in mind, it's also the idea that it doesn't make sense. That's a lot of email. There's got to be something bad in there. There's so many bad emails. It's all this waste of time. This just makes no sense. And I think that for an older person who's actually, from a generation that they lived in a house before a radio, or lived in a house before a computer, or before a television, or before a computer, that doesn't make any sense. For a person who has grown up in a house that's always had a computer, that's a whole different story. Right, my kids don't write me letters; they text me. They write me emails, right? So I think so. So really, he's really good. I mean, he really knows how to target the audience, and I think that has been one of his most effective approaches.
I really wanted to ask you something because we have like a little bit of time, but I really wanted your opinion about it. When he focuses his main idea on the idea of having a breast to be applied in the United States. Do you think he has fears of his country turning into Camp Calais, like in Paris? If you've seen the news about the riots and the chaos that are taking place in the north of Paris, or in the UK, they're afraid of having enormous flow of migrants coming to their country.
It would be I mean, you're saying that.
Is he afraid of
Afraid
that?
of
That's
that
wants to
becoming
yes.
having these refugee
Is
camps?
he afraid of like
I
people
don't-
coming from every direction to the United States?
The question is that, you know, if he really views immigrants coming to the country as something bad, to me that's un-American. I mean,
What is America to you, in one word?
Un-American is we're all children of immigrants, for goodness sake.
That's-
Everybody's come.
That's
My parents immigrated to the United States. His father immigrated to the United States. His mother immigrated. So again, the question becomes, you know, does he really believe in what he says? Now, if he does, you know, imagine if someone would say those type of things about his father, or to me, I would think he'd be rolling in his grave.
I don't want to interrupt you, but this is an amazing subject and it's broad, but we are out of time, and I would like to thank you so much for your time and for your valuable information. Thank you everybody for watching us. We are very sorry. I know it's a very interesting subject. We will continue in the next episode. Thank you.